Hello and welcome to the ROKER Report Extra Pod in association with the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen. Brett here, and this week I'm joined by a couple of individual exiles. One of those is Gary Winters. Gary, how you doing?
Yeah, all good down south, Brett. How's it going?
It's going very well, thank you very much, mate. Nice to have you on board. It's been a little while.
Indeed it has.
And we've also joined by, again, one of our old original exile friends. It's Paul Hunter. Paul, how are you?
Yeah, really good, Brett. Yeah, nice to be here.
You're representing the North East really for us.
That is true.
This week, aren't you? Because obviously you've got me and Gary as southern as they come, and then I say you're there with that North East flag. So yeah, welcome aboard, Paul. Good to have you.
Thanks. I better crank up the accent a little bit.
That's exactly it. So if you can mention pink slices, stotty cake, as much as possible, that would be perfect.
Okay, great.
So on today's pod, we're looking ahead to what, fingers crossed, is our last ever League One game. And as well as that, we're going to be casting an eye over our who we might be playing in the playoffs. So let's get straight into it. This Sunday, 12 o'clock, we are playing Northampton Town. They've just been relegated this Saturday, so they're playing for pride. Gary, in a nutshell, how are you looking at this game? You know, do you think it's something that we can rest players and relax, or do you want us to be really up in the tempo, getting some momentum and really going for the jugular?
Yeah, I think you touched on it, Brett, on the intro, that it's going to be a lot more of a relaxed game, which I think could suit us, to be honest. I don't see the importance in the game as such, other than to maybe try a couple of players out, give some players like Bailey Wright and Denver Hume some more match fitness. In terms of the game itself, it could be quite entertaining just because, again, the pressure's off. I like a good result running into the playoffs, but again, it's not essential. I'd just like to get some players in a bit of form, or give some players a chance, maybe Maguire, just to build a little bit of form and just had players kind of sharp and ready to go for the playoffs.
Yeah, so we will get into individual players shortly. Paul, yourself, would you be looking to rest players this weekend? I say that the actual semis themselves aren't until depending where we finish, 18th or 19th, and then the 21st or 22nd. Would you look to be like resting any players, or let's say, would you be looking to play a full strength team, get the win, and go into those playoffs with at least 2 wins behind us?
I don't think I'd be taking any chances with anyone who's a slight doubt for the playoffs. I think we couldn't have really asked for a more ideal game, really, against an opposition that's already been relegated, a team that have only got, as you touched on, personal pride to play for. They'll obviously still want to give a good account of themselves, as every League One team does when Sunderland come to town, but without anything to play for and without that home crowd, making sure that Northampton players are really up for it and really mentally engaged, if you will, then I don't think we could have asked for a better final game. I wouldn't take any risks. I think, play our strongest possible team to get that win, to carry the momentum into the playoffs. But if anyone's a doubt, then it's just not worth the risk of losing them for the first game.
No, that's exactly it. So let's actually look at our teams that we're going to be playing, and I know you both sort of have got your teams down. I think it's without a shadow of a doubt that Burge is going to be in goal. Our defence, though, where there's been so many players in, players out, I've never known a team to get so many injuries in one sort of position. Conor McLaughlin came back this weekend, just gone, played 45 minutes and then came off, which was actually planned before the game. So then it was himself, Wright, 09 and Hume in defence. Gary, would you look at changing anything in that, or do you think really that's a setback for there? 3 out of 4 of them are actual defenders, or would you sort of bring somebody else in just to mix things up and try and help us here?
Yeah, I think that's where I was going with it on the website. I think Martin had a comment on it, and I'm kind of in agreement with him, and actually Ant as well. They mentioned things like maybe play someone like Ollie Younger at centre half. Just, again, it's a nothing kind of game. Just give him a chance to be ready. So in that case, I'd probably take out 09, just give the lad a rest. He, I don't think he could prove anything else to us. So I'd probably leave him out, not Wright, because I still think Wright, I'm hoping it's more a lack of match sharpness than a lack of form, but he's kind of been getting better, so I'd kind of give him another 90. Again, same with Hume. He seems to be just building his way back into kind of 100% match fitness. And then I guess with Conor McLaughlin, depends how he's feeling after the game at the weekend. I'd be inclined to maybe give him 45 if he's feeling all right again, and kind of let McFadzean loose for the other 45. I'd never thought I'd say that, yeah. But that's how a nothing game this is for me.
And Paul, what were your sort of thoughts on that then, Bean? So Gary's things are sort of bringing younger into the fold. Would you agree with that, or would you try and keep it settled and try and build some partnerships?
Yeah, I can see where Gary and, as he touched on, Ant and Martin are going with that. Personally, I'd lean more towards what Gav and Craig touched on in our latest podcast in terms of allowing 09 and Bailey Wright to form some kind of partnership to go into the playoffs with. I'd lean more towards that camp. They haven't really clicked, and to their credit, they haven't had much games to be able to build that partnership. So I think this would be a good opportunity for them to do so. Hume is obviously, a shoe-in at left-back. I'd actually lean more towards bringing Max Power back to right-back. I just think he's got more of a delivery, and he offers more from right-back, in my opinion, compared to Conor McLaughlin. I'm not sure. I'd give McLaughlin some minutes to build up his match fitness, but yeah, I'd lean more towards Power from the right-back spot for me.
For myself, I think I'd probably start with McLaughlin at right back, as you touched on there, just to get him minutes. You know, if it's 45, that's good. If it's an hour, even better. This week, we need, especially in defence, bodies that are capable of playing. You know, so it's over 10 days to the first semi anyway. So from my side, I'd be looking to play McLaughlin. I think he's been okay actually this season compared to last season. He's nothing fancy. He just sort of does a job. He's a 6 or 7 out of 10 sort of player. But no, for me, I would I'd be sort of starting with him. In midfield, we had Scowen and Power sort of as on Saturday. Paul, you touched upon their sort of Power maybe going back into defence. Would you look at them bringing in sort of like Ledbetter or Winchester instead of Power?
Yeah, I'd bring in Winchester personally. I think centre mids is, without being too critical, it's our real Achilles heel. None of them are particular dynamic or really look to get in behind and run beyond the striker. I'd go with Winchester and Scowen just because they're more mobile and dynamic than Ledbetter and Power, and I think they're more suited to how we play when we play well and how we play the style of football that Johnson wants us to play. Bit more, in your face pressing. The 4 of them that we've mentioned, I think they've only got like 13 goals between them.
Yeah.
A few of them being penalties from Ledbetter. So there's not much there in terms of a goal threat. So you start to think, well, who are the best 2 in terms of, breaking up possession, distributing the ball? And I'd go with Winchester and Scowen out of the options available.
So you're going for Winchester and Scowen. Gary, what would your thoughts then be on the centre of the park?
I think for me, I actually prefer Power in the centre of the park. I've just seen him right back a few times, and he just sometimes just looks a bit lost, like he makes a dart up the wing and then kind of stops and then drifts back again. And I always feel like he's not sure positionally whether how far he should go forward or how far he should be back. And
in his defence, though, he's not a right back, is he? Though
I totally agree. I think he offers something. He's done absolutely brilliantly to cover, but I think given the choice now, we've got hopefully McLaughlin's fit. I'd probably push him into the centre because, as Paul said, I think 13 between. I think Power's probably got about 5 of those, so he's got some kind of goal threat. So I'd probably go with him. I've probably voiced the same thing a few times as Paul said there, that I'd have little preference between those 4 in midfield.
They are very interchangeable, aren't they?
They are. They're like the same, almost the same player. I'd just say maybe Power runs around a little more, or Scowen does as well, I guess. But yeah, I just don't. There's nothing that really gets behind a defence for me, or really kind of attacks, or is really kind of defensive and gets stuck in. So yeah, I'd probably play Power. Then the other position, I guess, I'm just going to pick a name out of the hat and go Winchester, just to give him some minutes, because Scowen had some minutes on the weekend and was fine. So I could see him starting in a playoff game. It's just I'd try and give Winchester some minutes before we get to the playoffs.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then it's in front of those 2 that's where the big question marks are going to be, really. So you've got, obviously, Maguire back in the goals. Let's start with him first, really, because that's where I say there's going to be big questions regarding what he's going to do on Sunday. So would you start him? Would you bring him off the bench? Paul, what do we do with the King, as he's I hate that nicknames, by the way, still.
Yeah, it's enough nickname, but I do like Maguire. I would 100% start him. I think if we go back 2 years to the end of that Jack Ross season, it felt like McGeady and Maguire were our 2 best attacking players in terms of who was most likely to make something happen out of nothing. And ever since then, nothing for me has really changed. In terms of my thinking, I still think they are our two best attacking players. I think Jordan Jones has came in and done well and looked a threat at times. But I really like Maguire. I think he's the perfect playoffs kind of player. He gets under the skin of the opposition. If there was a crowd, he would be there winding them up. And he can get you a goal out of nothing. He's a threat from set pieces. Yeah, he gives the ball away sometimes, but I think that's just the kind of player he is. That comes with those kind of, maverick type number 10s, right? So yeah, he's an absolute definite starter for myself.
Gary, you were nodding ahead like the Churchill dog just then.
Yeah, absolutely couldn't agree more. I think Maguire's probably given us in this league probably some of the best memories, some of the best moments. I think Gav talked about that as well. For me, obviously, I appreciate that maybe he's not been his best self this season. In equal measure, he's probably not been given ample opportunity to impose himself either, and we don't know the reasons behind that. But I think, as you saw at the weekend, he still looks hungry, and as Paul said, if there was a man made for the playoffs, and I'll support that with what he produced last season not last season, the season before in the semis, over 2 legs against Portsmouth. I think it's clear that he's a match winner, and I think even more so, in the Fratton Park leg, the ball draw, the 0-0, he was just chasing down everything, getting involved in anything, getting people's faces. I just think he's perfect for this, and he needs the minutes to give himself a chance.
I can see the argument in terms of does he start or does he come off the bench, but I think when he starts, he sets the tone in that first 10 minutes in terms of this is how it's going to be. I'm going to be winding up the opposition. You don't get that when he comes off the bench. So, yeah, I completely agree with Gary there. He should start for me.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not even suggesting he starts in the playoffs because I'm not sure. I'd like him to have a good game on the weekend. I just think you've got to start him there. And then I guess then it gives you a decision to make for the playoffs.
True.
That's exactly what I was about to say then, because the big question is, because also, is he that fit? He's never been the fittest bloke normally anyway, so he's definitely carrying a couple of extra pounds, I think. But I think
he's never been the picture of health, has he?
No, he hasn't. But as you say, he's got that little bit of magic that we at times we desperately need, and I think that's one of the. And I really like Lee Johnson, but I think one of the things, almost like Parkinson falling out with McGeady, Johnson not playing Maguire, especially even when those games sort of against Wigan, when we could have just done with someone coming off the bench who could do something different. It's just a strange thing how he's just let him just sit on the sidelines, not even in the squad some games. But I think he definitely needs to start on Sunday. I say more just to get minutes into his legs. And then, as Gary says, if he has a great game and then that's a decision that Johnson's got to make, brilliant.
I mean, he's one of those players, if he wants it, he really wants it. It's just he has off games like anyone, I guess, in those kind of attacking flair positions. So I guess that's just part and parcel of the kind of position. So even if he's not that effective on the weekend, I still wouldn't rule him out by any means.
Oh no, and saying that he's one of those players that if he was consistent, he wouldn't be playing in League One for the majority of his career.
That's very true,
He'd been playing at a high level. We know on his day, he should be playing in the Championship sort of thing, but he doesn't do that 46 games of the season. So, that he is where he is for that reason. But so we've both all said that Maguire's going to play. Who else are we going to play in that? It's always like a 3, isn't it, really? So Gooch was there as like the number 10 v Plymouth. Excellent game, and a hand in all of the goals. And then we had Jordan Jones and Jack Diamond either side getting the nod with McGeady missing out with injury. Gary, where would you go then for these other sort of 2 positions?
I think given how Gooch played, I'm inclined to give him that start again in that same kind of number 10 role, just to try and build some momentum there. No one else has maybe claimed that position. I know we've tried O'Brien, and I think O'Brien's had enough chances this season that I'm only kind of giving him now a supporting role if needed in the playoffs. But I'd rather give Gooch that role, give him a chance. Hopefully he can put in another good shift and kind of cement his place there. And
then who are you going to go with for that other one? So you're going to go for Jordan Jones, or would you give Jack Diamond another go up there?
Yeah, I'm torn on this one. I quite like to. I'm going to just side with Diamond. There's no particular reason other than just getting him kind of more minutes, just because across the season, I think he deserves more chances. He's been a bit unlucky, if I'm honest. I think there's games where he's probably played quite well and he's either been hauled off or dropped the next game.
Yeah.
Jones, I feel like we know what he can do. Appreciate maybe he's not as consistent as we would have hoped because there's been a little purple patch he was on, where he's fantastic and we're all raving about him, but he's gone a little quieter, but then he still pops up with those moments. So he's probably one I'd start in the playoffs, but for this weekend, I'd give Diamond that run.
And then Paul, so who have you got behind the striker then? So we've got Maguire, and who are your other two going to be?
Yeah, I've actually gone for the same as Gary. I've gone with Gooch. I think you have to play Gooch based on his performance last week. The problem with Gooch and Diamond, to an extent, although it's probably a little bit early to say this about him, is when they've put in a 7.5, 8 out of 10 performance, they've then followed it up with like a 4 or a 5 the next week. That's a problem with these players sometimes. But I'd go with them two, with Jones coming off the bench for whoever's having the least effective game.
Nice.
So yeah, I'd start with Gooch and Diamond. Diamond looked good last week. He's more raw than Jones.
Yeah.
He doesn't have as, I'd say, genuine quality as Jordan Jones. But yeah, let's give them two a go and see what happens.
And then the last position then, so up front, obviously Charlie Wyke didn't play on Saturday. It was precautionary. So it was his brother put out on Twitter. So would you just literally just go for Ross Stewart up front? He scored at the weekend. Deserves that other chance, Paul?
Yeah, I'd start Ross Stewart for sure. It wouldn't make sense to drop him after a good display and a well-taken goal. I don't think you'd see Wyke scoring that kind of goal that Stewart scored last week.
Not the run beforehand.
Yeah, not being able to sort of run the line and then have a bit of pace to get away from the defender. And it was actually a decent, although simple enough finish. I'd like to actually see what Stewart can do with a little bit of a run in the side. It'd be good to see him give Lee Johnson a real selection headache for the playoffs and even force a situation where he has to start. It sounds a bit bizarre saying that when you've got a 30-goal striker in Wyke, but not to turn this into a Wyke bashing minute or so, but we all know how, I think Martin wrote in his little synopsis in terms of who he would play, how one-dimensional Wyke can be and how that McGeady to Wyke link-up is becoming potentially a little bit predictable. So yeah, I'd go with Stewart and take it from there.
It'll be good as well, just to be able to mix it up anyway. So almost so we've got plan A, it can be McGeady Wyke, plan B can be Stewart and something else. So it at least makes us not so one-dimensional. Gary, what were your thoughts on the strike as well? Are you going to go for Stewart as well?
Yeah, definitely. Similar reasons, to be honest. It feels like we've kind of been found out. Like on paper, we score plenty of goals, it looks like, in comparison to other teams around us. But it is really hard to criticise Wyke, and I'm grateful that someone showed up. But I always thought that someone could, whether it's him or even Grigg, and that sounds mental, but if they were just given a run in the team, just which one of them, just play them for 10, 12 games and see where it got us, and it got us in a good position. But we know what he can do, whether he's fit, whether he's not fit. I'd say just leave him out of this one. He's probably going to be plan A, but then again, if Stewart goes and bangs a hat-trick, you just don't know, do you? But it's good to have those options.
Yeah, the competition in strikers is not a bad thing, is it?
Not at all.
So that's your starting 11s. Let's have a look at Northampton. We played them at the beginning of January. Now, it was the first game back after COVID, so I don't know if you remember, it was an absolutely dull, 0-0, horrible game. Obviously, they've been relegated, as we said. Their form of the last 5 games, for what it matters now, is they lost 3-0 to Blackpool, which obviously saw them go down. 2-2 with Gillingham. They actually beat Ipswich 3-0, but that was just after a 3-1 loss to Peterborough, and then they drew 1-1 with Bristol Rovers. So, Paul, what are you expecting from them, really? And as I say, they're just playing for pride, surely.
Yeah, I think with nothing to play for, you would think that would be pretty much it for them. If there was a home crowd there, as I touched on earlier, I feel like it would be a lot different. You know, with Sunderland coming to town, they would have the fans on their back, making sure the defence are mentally tuned in. But I don't know. I guess that, if people are playing for contracts potentially at the end of the season, there's that to think about. But no, it should be hopefully a comfortable win. They've got their top scorer is a midfielder, Ryan Watson, midfield with 10 goals, and then Sam Hoskins is a striker with 8 in 42. So sort of 2018 sort of Charlie Wyke territory.
So it's one of those games, I think, if we score an early goal, it could break their hearts and it could be a bit of a hammering, really. Gary, yourself, what are your thoughts?
My only concern with this one is it could just turn into a bit of an exhibition match of just nothing going on. Drab. I would hope not, because of what's on the line, particularly for us.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you see those weird games. I think we did it to Wolves, didn't we, when we were in the Championship, when we were down, and I think they'd won the league, hadn't they?
And then they walked the league as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they'd walked they were class that season, but maybe that's what happens when two teams have not a lot to play for, but I think manager had been sacked by then as well, so
I think there was also
strange things happened.
We saw, but that's when the likes of Barney Mumba came on, wasn't it? At like 16 or something. It was a strange old game.
Yeah, Paddy McNair had a stormer that day. If I remember
was it 3-1? I think 3-1, 3-0. I can't remember. I know we back. It was uncharacteristically of us of that season.
Yeah, we were definitely 3 up. They might have got a consolation, but yeah, something weird was in the air. So you never know, do you? But hopefully we can beat them. Like you said, I guess I'd expect the fact that you've just listed off there that they've lost 3-0 to Blackpool, 3-1 Peter, or is it 3-0 Hull? I know the Ipswich game's in there, but
yeah, they've let a lot of goals in.
Yeah, the guys around us are all putting 3 past them, so there's the bar.
Right, so that's Northampton done and dusted. But this weekend is obviously going to be slightly different. We'll be keeping our eyes on other results going on around us to see who we're getting in the playoffs. Now, with the midweek results, Blackpool have actually leapfrogged us in the 3rd spot. So currently we're 4th, and we will be playing Lincoln. However, we could be playing one of 5 teams. So let's have a look at who we're playing. And bizarrely, all the teams that are in the playoffs or could be in the playoffs are actually playing at home this weekend. So Blackpool are playing Bristol Rovers. Obviously, Blackpool have beaten us twice, 1-0 in April. Lincoln are playing Wimbledon. So we drew 1-1 at home with them, but we did beat them 4-0 at their place in one of the probably our best performances of the season. Plus, as well, we did beat them on penalties in the semis of the Papa Johns. Portsmouth are home to Accrington and Stanley. Obviously, another great away performance there, saw us beat them 2-0 at Fratton Park. But we did lose 3-1 in October, which seems a very, very long time ago. That result seems ages. Oxford played Burton. Now, we beat them 2-0 in our first league win of the season away from home, and pretty much shithoused our way to a 3-1 win on Good Friday. And then Charlton at home to Hull, another recent home defeat, losing 2-1. And we drew 0-0 at the Valley earlier in the season when we had Danny Graham up front. Plus, obviously, it's Charlton and it's the playoffs, which is never a good mix. But that would be the ultimate hoodoo breaker. Paul, out of those 5 then, who would you fancy playing in the playoffs, in the semis? And who would you most like to be avoiding?
My dream scenario would be to get Lincoln in the semis. So as it stands, keeping that the way it is, I think we'd have a great chance against them. We've beat them, I think, 5-1 over aggregate over the 2 games.
Yep.
Obviously,
over aggregate, the 2 it is 5-1, yeah.
Doesn't always work out like that, but I'd give us a good chance to progress to the final. And then if Oxford can sneak into that 6th spot, if they can sneak in ahead of Pompey and then beat Blackpool, not that I've planned this all through, and then beat Blackpool in their semi, that would be ideal. Blackpool I wouldn't be too fussed about, but if I could choose, I'd ideally want to avoid, as they've turned us over twice in quick succession recently. Charlton, Charlton's the one for me. I think besides the whole media hysteria that would come with playing Charlton again in the playoffs, i.e. wheeling out Mickey Gray in a suit every 10 minutes. I just don't fancy playing him. Their centre forward bullied us the other week, and they seem a lot more physical than us, and I wouldn't want to go there. Pompey, not too first, but my gut tells me we're going to play Portsmouth at some point.
Yeah.
And I think I said in the group chat a couple of weeks ago, I think during a real state of cynicism after a loss, that we're going to lose to the Cowleys. And I just hope that doesn't come to fruition. Yeah, so I'd really like to avoid Charlton and Pompey for those reasons.
I've got a real worry about Oxford, just because I've got a feeling that before the game, Robinson's going to literally put a picture of Max Power sliding along that floor in front of the dugout and just pin that on the changing room wall and going, that's what you've got to beat today. Gary, who do you fancy then? So who would you like to play and who would you most like to avoid?
To be honest, in all of those, out of any of those teams, there seems to be a lot of recent history in some of those. Obviously, Blackpool, that's probably the least of them, but we've lost twice to them recently in a few games. But then, as we talked about, Portsmouth, we've got the history. Also, the Cowleys.
They're our big rivals, aren't they, Portsmouth? So.
Well, they're our massive rivals.
it's technically a derby game.
And then you've got Oxford, obviously, after we were a bunch of shithouses, and obviously Stuart Donald's loyalty towards them.
Oh, do you know what? I didn't even put that into the equation either. I didn't put the Stuart Donald connection to it.
To go up. And then, Charlton as well. I'm totally in agreement. I guess pinned on the match alone when we lost 2-1 to them, I still think we could have been 2 or 3 up. If Wyke had his shooting boots on that day, we could have been out of sight before they went 1 up on us. So I feel like on a different day we could have won that game. But I think it's just the hoodoo, just 2 Wembley wins. If someone could guarantee me that we go and beat them at Wembley, I'd take it out of any of these all day long.
This of all seasons where we seem to be breaking hoodoos every other week. They say there was the Wembley hoodoo, the Fleetwood hoodoo, the Joey Barton hoodoo, the Burton hoodoo. There's all these hoodoos, and they say that would be the ultimate hoodoo breaker.
Yeah, absolutely would. I mean, when you look at it, and you've just pointed out that they're all at home as well, the way the table is now, with those fixtures you've just rattled off, the table should stay exactly how it is now, but that's never how it works, and I guarantee that one of those teams is going to slip up, aren't they? There's no way all 4 of us are winning games.
No, because I was looking at it, so obviously like Bristol Rovers, Blackpool and us are in the same positions really, because we've got Bristol Rovers and Northampton who are both relegated. Charlton are at home to Hull, who have already won the league and probably listened to songs from George Honeyman. So other than that, I say you can see wins everywhere. Like really, I can see it literally falling as you say, Gary, as it is. I think we'll end up playing Lincoln. Blackpool will play Portsmouth. That's my prediction anyway.
It's just such an unpredictable league, isn't it? I mean, it's really hard to say. There's a reason why these teams are in the playoff is because they're inconsistent. So it's hard to say this is going to happen, that's going to happen. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. We've just got to win our game and then see who we're playing.
It's a funny one as well, because if you look at all the form of all those sides, they're quite poor. I mean, Blackpool's probably the best, but that's more if you cast the net over the last 10. If you look at the last 6, Blackpool's starting to slip a bit. And we've obviously played them twice and given them 2 wins, but they were drab games. There was nothing going on in those. I can't say I'm afraid of them. Obviously, there's that psychological impact of losing to them twice and not scoring, I guess, is more of the focus. But I mean, we've been beaten by a great strike, and that last one Kai banged one.
My big fear playing Blackpool is having to sit through that first half like we sat through the other week when we was at home, because it was the worst game of football I've ever seen. And as you say, it was a wonder strike that finished it off, and we sort of rallied a little bit at the end. But yeah, Blackpool, I don't think weren't over the 2 legs, or 2 games, should say. They weren't amazing, were they? So
no, and they would say the same about us, to be fair.
Oh, definitely.
But I think we're all much of a muchness out of this kind of 4 that could be in the playoffs. I don't think anyone's going to fear each other, and I don't see any reason why they should.
There's a possibility fans might be allowed, according to some recent news, I think.
Yes, so from what I can gather, as of the game's on the 18th and 19th, as of the 17th, 10,000 fans, or if depending on the size of the stadium, so for us, 10,000 home fans will be allowed in, which is brilliant, and I think I remember I read somewhere that we've got about 13,000 season ticket holders who have paid for the season and obviously not gone. So I think obviously they've got to have first shout on getting tickets for it. So it's literally the only fair way of doing it. But yeah, Paul, it'd be great to get at least some fans going to see some football this season.
Yeah, and absolutely. I'm just thinking if we have to go to Fratton Park, that could be a disadvantage if they're allowed. It's a tough place to go as it is when you're allowed away fans. So just with a home crowd, but, we could flip that on our head and say, coming to the Stadium of Light, hopefully, although it hasn't been too hard for teams in recent years, could be a lot tougher with, just 10,000 home fans there cheering us on. So, yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out.
We'll see. But, gentlemen, that's pretty much us done and dusted then for today. So, so what do we think? Let's say Sunday. Gary, what's your prediction going to be then?
Based on what the teams ahead of us have done to Northampton recently, I'm just going to say that we're going to win 3-0. You're
going for a 3-0. And Paul, what do you fancy?
I think Northampton might score, but yeah, I fancy us to win comfortably 3-1.
I'm going to go for 4-0, and it'd be a definite clean sheet. And Bailey Wright will be the Bailey Wright from the beginning of the season, and he'll bleach his hair blonde just to prove it. So, gentlemen, we are done. Thank you very much, Gary. Been great having you on board.
Yeah, really enjoyed that, Brett. Cheers for having us.
And likewise, Paul, we'll say it's really, really good having talking to you again.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks, Brett.
As always, you can subscribe on Acast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube or Amazon, and join us on Sunday after the game. Don't forget, it's a 12 o'clock kickoff Sunday. Thanks for listening. See you later.